So Matt, I have this recollection of you of seeing you in that ground floor studio. Well, it wasn't the ground floor; it was kind of up those stairs. And
it was weirdly in the first floor, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was those corridors that ran around the edges of the studios.
Yeah, it was funny, that place, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was full. It was like a war. It was like a rabbit run.
Such a fuck up, that place. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I remember one time just in the studio, and it was a big open sculpture studio, and I remember some girl doing some welding, and I turned around, nothing, fine, working away. Everyone had their own little spaces and stuff, and I turned around and suddenly her hair was on fire, and it's like, fucking hell, you know, it's just...
What happened now, health and safety?
No, that's what I mean. I mean, there was no health nor safety. I remember, you know Jeff Brunel? Remember him? He was the head of department, a right arse. And if he's here, fuck off. And anyway, so I had a big argument with him. I think a week before my degree show, and because I sort of like had a mammoth loss of faith with the work and hated it and thought it was shit and wanted to start again. I think a week before the show.
Yeah.
And so I took it. He said I wasn't allowed to do anything, and pretty much tried to ban me from the studio and tried to say you've got to show. So do you remember the lifts?
Yeah, they had.
So I put all my work in the lift and I took it to the top and I chucked it off.
I'm getting it's starting to come back.
Yeah, and it was not outside, it was inside the building. I just fucking chucked the whole lot off. God, I know, mad. I only remember that the other day. I woke up in a cold sweat.
Yeah.
Thinking I'd done it like the day before.
I remember looking 2 or 3 times. I have these, because it's quite a few years ago. These recollections of seeing you looking quite tortured.
Tortured?
Yeah.
Confused?
No, well, yeah, I don't know.
Tortured.
But, there was definitely like a kind of tortured thing.
Yeah, I definitely went through a sort of a tortured existential moment. Yeah. Didn't you?
I'm still fucking going through it. But after years of therapy, I'm actually now quite comfortable.
Now you torture other people.
Yeah, now just listen to people
now you're the
who are tortured.
Yeah. No, it was an odd college, because there was a kind of an indigenous sort of set of miserable middle-aged artist tutors who just kind of like, inflicted their shit on everyone. I remember one time coming to college, and there was a certain point when everyone started getting into kind of like reading.
Gary Barker. That's an end that's...
Chris Want, do you remember Chris Want? Mike O'Prey.
Sorry, somebody...
Gary Barlow.
No, not Gary Barlow, Gary Barker.
Gary Barcode.
Have you? Where at?
Currently now at Leeds College.
Oh, maybe he was at Leeds. Oh, actually, maybe he was at Leeds College. That's where I did my foundation. So maybe
Remember
the guy with grey hair who was sculpture?
Oh,
what's his name?
God, yeah. And he always used to wear sort of pastel.
That's right. Yeah.
Polo. Yeah, right. Twat. Oh, fucking hell. Chris Dawson. He was a twat. But I remember, like I said, towards the end of the sort of, there were people, we were trying to think about stuff and make work that wasn't just about sort of like, sort of, I don't know, sublimated penises and things, It was like, I remember one day coming into the sculpture department and just seeing a life model, third year of a fucking sculpture department, a life model that had been posed by Chris Dawson, who was kind of like used to sort of, his kind of critical prowess was based upon, a great work of art was depending on how many people it took to lift it, and it really was that sort of moronic, monolithic idiocy. I mean, and I came in, I just walked in, perhaps a little bit late, and there were these easels all the way around, which I just thought, fucking hell, no, what's going on? And I just remember looking this kind of like straight, it was like a kind of a flick book of obscenity, these terrible drawings. And in the middle, this kind of life model, this girl and a bicycle with her lower parts just sort of like, you can imagine the formalistic tension between the saddle and her, And I just looked at her and just, fucking hell, I just walked straight out, went home. It was like, I'm not, just incredible, yeah, anyway. Sorry, you're probably all doing life drawing now, I don't know. But at the time, it just seemed so inappropriate,
Do people still have to do that at Art Club? Do you have to do life drawing?
Really?
I was like sticking things in books.
I remember the first life drawing I ever did when I was about 16. And I remember, because when you're that young, you kind of think that when you draw, you're trying to split the atom. So you've got like a 13H pencil, you know, it's like, and you don't do that thing where you kind of like, you know, try and proportionately judge the composition before you go straight into the eye. And it's like, draw the glint in the eye. Like 8 hours later, it's like the eyelash. And you work your way around until, you know, when you stand back, the thing is like anamorphic, like completely like, but I remember I kind of did manage to get around this kind of outline of this body and this woman sitting there like that. And then at the bottom, the little bit where I'd kind of like, was the kind of anomalous area, what the fuck am I going to do here? But there was a little string coming out. And I thought, what the fuck is that? And I thought, you know, what should I tell her she's got a bit of fluff or some, like, maybe she sat on a tea bag or something like that. I don't know, you know, maybe what should I say?
Actually, hang on a minute, did they have string draw tea bags back then? I'm not sure they did.
I did where I come from.
All right, okay.
Where you come from. And yeah, and I thought, you know, what should I do? Should I sort of kind of go up and lightly tap her and say, she's got a bit of string, you know, a bit of wool or whatever it is coming out here. You know, and I thought, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to draw it? I mean, you know, what would Picasso do? I just ignored it. I tore the paper off. I've run out of room. Can't do it. Sorry.
And Jeff came down and gave you a bollocking for it.
Yeah, equally actually. I mean, when I used to teach at Goldsmiths, I mean, just on the subject of vaginas. Nice segue. That's a weird word to use, but I was teaching at Goldsmiths. It's I think the last day I ever taught at Goldsmiths. I got this chit, this student chit. You get this kind of, they put these things up, and you've got to find them around this college, and it's quite a kind of a distributed sort of college. I don't know if you've ever been down there.
Yeah,
But there's students in the sort of backfield, some up there and over there. It's like, fucking hell, where are they? Find these students. You've got this chit, and it's like shopping for a student. And I found there was this girl, it was a Korean girl, and she requested my presence in the backfield edit suite. And it was like, you know, edit suite was like a little shed, completely blacked out with a little monitor about that big. And we both sat like that. And she was crapping herself, she was shaking. And I started shaking because I was thinking, she was so nervous and she could hardly speak English, you know. And I was thinking, fuck, you know, right, okay, it's a film. This is a nightmare because this film's going to last 8 hours. If it's an art film, it's going to last 8 hours. It's going to be so dull. And then I'm going to have to find some fucking intelligent thing to ask her about in order to make her feel like her shit was worth it. So, you know, we watched this kind of white screen for about, you know, sort of an interminable amount of times, like, and she's going like that, kind of checking that I'm looking. I'm like looking at her thinking, fuck, I've got to think of something to say. You know, already I'm thinking of, you know, why is it white? Why is there nothing there? What is it? You know, why isn't there anyone on there? And then suddenly this sort of like thing came, and I suddenly, you know, it kind of unfolded in front of me. That's the right word to use. Because it occurred to me that the camera wasn't actually sort of horizontal, it was kind of like vertical. And so it was pointing up, and there was obviously a piece of quite strong glass going across, which I couldn't see, and that she had obviously come in naked and sat down over the camera. So then I had this kind of amazing sort of like view of her fucking... It was like, have you ever seen like a snail when it goes on glass? It was unbelievable. I was kind of like sat like that, looking at this thing going, and I'm fucking shaking. I'm thinking, what the fuck am I going to say about this? Not only that, but the critique of it was that between her legs, that she had like a copy of Cosmopolitan or something like that, and then she put it in there, and it'd be like fucking Hello or something. So it was, you know, it was a kind of critique of body and, you know, dysmorphia and whatever, and sort of like fucking whatever. And it was just, what the fuck could I say, you know? And so all I could say, which is like the most remedial thing to ever ask anyone about their art, is, what's it about? And I think after 10 years of teaching, like I think it was like a reversion to the first day of teaching. Like when you go and you see someone's work and you go, what's it about? They look at you like, you idiot, you know. It's like, yeah, everyone knows not to say that. That's a ridiculous thing to say, you know. And I just said, what's it about? And she just said, it's about the body. And I was like, fucking no shit. It's like unbelievable. Anyway, so that was it. I just got up and left, and I never went back. I never looked back.
Have you actually taught since?
I don't go to edit suites. No dark rooms with girls.
I want to go back and...
It's etched.
I know.
If you look in my eye, you can see it.
I want to go back and just ask about why you work with your brother. You know, why's that happened? Why did it happen?
Well, I think the idea of avoiding the idea of the work of art being kind of a confessional act of autobiography. You know, something that's the manifestation of some kind of latent sort of sense of self or identity or, you know, self-reflection. I think the thing about having two people making the work needs to say the work is about the conversation and not some inwardly reflecting, you know, if you increase the numbers, it makes sure that the work of art isn't reducible to some sense of expression, you know, because, you know, it's unlikely that you're both going to go into the same studio in the same mood to make the same work of art that will then be spontaneously sort of expressively authentic. You know, it'd be like saying, you both go into the studio and you're both happy and you make a happy work of art, and then that's fully reducible to a symbiotic sort of identity. The point about two people making the work is that it increases the degrees of schizophrenia. Not schizophrenia as a pathology, but just the idea that the conversation about the work makes the work in the world before it's something which kind of goes through the filter of sort of, you know, the ego. We're not interested in works of art that are about, identity, not interested in the slightest. You know, we're kind of interested in the idea that the work is about a description of the world that's in the world.
Was it... No.
I just bored myself.
No, it went really quiet then for a minute, and it was beautiful because everybody got...
I think they prefer me to talk about...
Yeah. No. Maybe. Do you?
I haven't got any more stories like that. That's the only one.
So was it conscious then? Was it a really conscious thing that you did? I mean, you know, did you have that dialogue of like, let's work together and...
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't... It was a conversation that was glacial in as much as, you know, we were both making our own work for sort of, you know, obviously a certain amount of time, you know, significantly through BA and then, you know, first couple of years of Royal College. And so the conversation about the work that we were making independently was kind of pretty much along those lines anyway. I mean, Dino wasn't making expressionistic paintings. I think that most of the things he painted were these sort of benign rocks. And benign rocks? Rocks, just paintings of rocks. Brilliant. Loads of rocks, just doing absolutely nothing. Rocks. And I remember at Royal College, I just wandered into this terrible sort of barren wasteland of non-production, and I think actually I just became more focused on the institutional obligation to make sculpture, and then finding ways of actually sort of undermining it. So I kind of like got a little bit caught up with the, you know, the institutional dynamic of being at the Royal College. I think, you know, I was routinely dragged out and made to do sort of. You know, I was always threatened with being kicked out, not because I did anything awful, but because, you know, I couldn't really bring myself to make sort of big bronze sculptures of, you know, women and men and stuff. And so I think, you know, I used to have to do these, what are they called? Like, it was like an adjudication board thing where I'd have to offer some new work, and I'd do things like I'd go and record my feet walking up to the canteen, and then, you know, and say that's sculpture. You know, why is it not? You know, it's a dematerialist work of art, and they just roll their eyes and just think, oh God, you know, what an arse, can't wait till you leave. You know, so I was doing a lot of that. So in a sense, you know, I was kind of already thinking about sort of stuff that wasn't just about, you know, making art as a kind of, as I said, a sort of a confessional process. So the conversation was already kind of in the breach before the actual convergence actually became a thing, you know, and it just seemed kind of, you know, a nice idea. It wasn't a decision. We didn't really say, you know, kind of like, we didn't kind of reach this sort of position of, you know, kind of perspectival position where we just said, right, now let's start. It's just we started messing around with stuff, doing drawings together. And but then when we decided to start, we kind of thought, well, you know, where do you start? We start with kind of, you know, the first modern artist, and we start with Goya. So that's where our interest in Goya started, was to try and sort of, you know, forensically retrace the emergence of the first sort of, you know, expressive modern artist, the first artist who's sort of freed from, you know, the iconography of the church, and is the first artist who sort of is tortured, you know, and his work is kind of racked with sort of torment. So we started there.
How long after you started working with Dinos did things start to proliferate in terms of profile for you?
I think we must have left Royal College around 1993, I guess, or earlier actually. But I think it was around then. I think it was pretty quick.
Was it?
It was pretty quick, yeah.
What was that like? What was it like to suddenly be thrust into that? 'Cause it was a mad time, wasn't it, culturally in Britain?
It was very strange. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you, that I don't think anyone of our generation who went to art school had this trajectory of thinking they were going to come out, with some vocational notion of being an artist. I mean, most people went to art school because they didn't know where else to go, or at least it was a kind of a much more dynamic. It was a kind of it was a cosmology of education rather than a kind of a pinpointed career. That's essentially because people were prepared to pay taxes for people to go to college and pay their fucking fees. A rolling sense of social obligation and responsibility, which is now obviously being stripped away. I went to art school because I wanted to be in a band. I never met anyone who else wanted to be one with me. So,
what did you play?
Sorry?
What did you play?
I play guitar.
Do you, right?
Yeah.
Are you good?
I'm all right, actually. Yeah. Better than art.
Yeah.
Really? Well, yeah. God, yeah.
Excuse me, can we just cheer for money in education for art?
Great.
Yeah. Actually, if you so I use Facebook and we've got a little Chinwag page that there is a petition going out that I'd really encourage everybody to sign, which basically the government are trying to strip out creativity out of the curriculum, and that means everything. That means drama, dance and art.
So continue stripping.
Continue stripping, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, but it might not be a bad thing.
Go on.
Did that come out? No, I don't know. No, I don't think so. I just sort of think if it's going to get so shit, it'll, I mean, the problem is you talk about austerity measures and stuff as being a cause for all these sort of cuts and stuff, but this has been on the programme for right-wing thinking for years. This is a reverse social mobility. So I don't know if you'd really want to kind of because I'm always kind of slightly cautious about signing stuff like that, because then if it becomes a kind of if it has a consensus sort of appeal to it, you get fucking Cameron all over it like a rash.
He was moaning today, actually, or yesterday, wasn't he, about the cuts in his...
In Whitney, yeah.
Cuts in his butcher.
Is that an oxymoron, that? Is it an example of an oxymoron?
Oxymoron.
Who?
Oxycontin.
Poxymoron.
Poxymoron, yeah.
Or if you grew up in the 70s, Roxy. So you've got to try, haven't you?
Yeah.
God, I just jumped off a cliff there. So I've completely run out of questions now. Shall we get everybody talking a little bit?
Yeah, go on then. Have a little chat.
Yeah, go on. So, while we've got the loop. No, of course I've never ever run out of questions. But I never run out of questions. I've always got young stuff going on inside. But for those of you that have been here before, you'll know that we do like to kind of make this, because it's an intimate space, we'd like to take questions. That gentleman there, he's always got a good question.
It's not that good, it's a bit fluffy. I mean, what do you think...
What, did you know he was going to ask you that? You sound prepared.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Tricky, yeah.
Smart ass one, but not tonight. What do you think the legacy of, being one yourself, the YDAs are? Do you think it'll be, cunts or...
Yeah.
I don't know, because there was a point where, they were seen as the new British future art, but then...
Yeah, I mean,
the establishment now,
Well, I think it's kind of,
Did you believe that?
Right, look, three things. Young. It's Dinos. Dinos! A round of applause for Dinos. He's back from LA. Right, look. Yeah. Three things. Young, British and artists. I mean... I don't, you know, I always thought it was. I mean, I think the thing is that, you know, we were saying before, you know, there was no sort of model for being a young artist when we were young artists. I mean, no one, you know, when the thing happened, it kind of happened because there were 3 TV stations and there were probably 2 newspapers. So it happened because there was a kind of a parochialism to the world, which is completely different to now.
At the same time, I think you had, you know, a lot that came out of Tory oppression in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
And we're now,
Yeah.
you're not really going to have that, because there's so much
Yeah.
middle ground that there's not going to be a continuation of, I suppose, rebellion through,
Well,
through mediums.
yeah, no, it's absolutely right. But I guess what I'm saying.
You're not having that.
Cider, I need to get yours first.
No, I don't know. No. Yeah, no, I think that's true. But I think, you know, I think the idea of marginality kind of creates a false sense of romanticism. You know, it creates a sense of sort of, you know, a kind of like a kind of sense of the avant-garde. You know, that somehow there's a, you know, there's some, you know, it's the master and the slave reversing the polarity. And I think the thing about the YBA thing was that, you know, in hindsight, and even at the time, I mean, I think it was quite obvious that there was a lot of shit work. And a lot of artists that were kind of inhabiting a discourse that they had no fucking clue about, really, you know. And like I said, when I did my stint at Goldsmiths, you know, a lot of the stuff, you know, it kind of, you know, I went there because I thought there was this kind of sort of theoretical sort of bias actually there in favour of kind of like, thank you, textual stuff rather than just sort of, you know, making art. But it was just simply about a kind of, you know, anyway, let's not bother going there. But I don't know if there's a legacy. I think the legacy should be one of sort of like, you know, healthy disdain, really. I think. I don't think there's any reason to respect it because I don't think it's, you know, I mean, the only thing I can think is that, you know, when I'm sort of thinking about our, you know, the mannequin pieces that we used to make, those little mannequin sculptures with all the sneakers, and I was thinking that at some point in time in history, if people bother to keep those things, there might be a nice idea where there's a crossfade between the value of the mannequin and the value of the sneaker. But maybe what will happen is the sneakers will become real fucking expensive things and they'll just chin the art. The other thing that we used to do as well with early work was thinking about, you know, kind of like imagining things like, you know, future x-rays of our work, you know, like you do with Da Vinci and stuff like that, Michelangelo's, what's actually behind these things that's actually better than what's on the surface. And then you have to make a decision about peeling the surface off to find the much better, you know, the grumpier Mona Lisa underneath or whatever it is, you know. So we used to get porn magazines and put them in the sculptures, thinking that, you know, what would be really nice is that if they ever get x-rayed, you know, might get some idiot going, no, go on, it's worth chopping it up, come on, because it might be something even better, and it was like Razzle. Oh, sorry, Freeze magazine.
It's all a bit like what you've done with the Goya in a way. You've kind of like rectified the surface, and then in the future, in hundreds of years' time, you know, there's a conversation that will be about rectifying.
What, taking off our rectification?
Yeah.
I think that's very rude. That is definitely not what I was saying.